Okay, let me see if I can try this again. See if I can get this to work. Funny how I had problems. Kept saying it wasn't connecting or something. Okay. Well, hopefully this is working. Let me check this, make sure. Yeah, should be. Everything should be right. I hope it's not just a black screen. Let me refresh this page because it looks like it ain't okay. It's just my computer acting up. All right. So I know this is a little different than what I usually do. I usually play games, but I don't know. I thought I'd share this. Um, I did this a couple of months ago, and now I'm not no preacher or nothing, so or I don't study no bibliology or nothing like that. But I went ahead and well, I had some questions, and I kind of got pointed to read the book of Matthew, and so when I read it, I was like, well, I might as well, learn what the lessons were that were trying to be taught. And I wanted to learn, the lessons Jesus was teaching, specifically what he was teaching. Um, so what I got here is the simplified, broke down version. My original notes were a lot, but so what I found was the main thing was the Sermon on the Mount, which was kind of at the beginning. I know there's stuff before that, but the real lessons begin right here. And as you can tell, I put these in numbers because I kind of put them in some categories. But as you can see where it says like Matthew 5, these aren't all exactly in sync. And the reason that is, I realized when Jesus was doing his sermon, he would touch on subjects, but then he would build on others. And then he would sometimes come back to the same kind of topic, but building on that, which you'll see as I break down. So the first thing is he breaks down, how to serve God, how to serve his Father. And the first lesson is probably pretty obvious. Caring for others for the sake of righteousness and for the service to God. And that's kind of a big one because as you can tell as he builds up to this, every time you do something for caring for others, he doesn't want you to do it so that it makes you feel good. And it's not that it can't make you feel good, but um, you're not doing it to feel good. You're not doing it to get something out of it. You're supposed to be doing it because you're doing it for God. God wants you to do these things. His Father wants you to do these things. Now, keep in mind, some of these, because when I read this book, it took me forever because there's some things I didn't understand. I had to go ask people. I had to look stuff up, and it might not be surprising. There's a lot of different interpretations for stuff, and until I got an interpretation that I could be like, okay, I get it. Uh, until then, I wouldn't be satisfied. So I'd have to stop and wait until I got that, and then I'd have to start back again. Anyway, so the second lesson kind of builds on the first one. Doing good for the Lord's sake, not for attention. And again, the pray in private, keep it short. Again, kind of builds on the first part. Like you're doing good for the Lord's sake, not to get something out of it. That's the key. He don't want you to do something thinking you're doing it only because you're going to get a reward, because you don't always, because it's not necessarily a reward based system that he wants you to base this on. And I think that's kind of a good thing. Like sometimes it's not bad to do a nice thing just to do a nice thing, and not want anything out of it. That's and he's not even telling you don't do it. Uh, don't do it whether you get something out of it. He's saying you do it for him, and even say you're doing it for him, which is fine. And then this one's pretty big. I did have a hard time kind of putting this one somewhere because it's kind of two parts. So it's forgiving others, um, and then don't show off, seek attention from others. And he was using fasting as an example. Like if you're doing fasting, don't go around and be like, "Hey, oh, I'm fasting right now, guys. I'm doing my prayer fasting." It's like keep it in private, because you're not supposed to do it to be all trying to just be showy. There's a lot of stuff you should be doing, and you should be doing in private. You don't have to boast about it. Once you start boasting, from my understanding, once you start boasting, you're now doing it for you and not for the Lord. That's how it's understood. The second category I got is us enduring and God providing. So we got lesson 2, and I got all these so you can check and see where I got this, you know, idea from those verses. I don't want to spend the time going down every single verse. If you don't believe me, you can check it. Even if mistreated in the service of God, you are blessed. That's part of that enduring, that you, just because you're doing the service of God don't mean everything's going to go right, that nobody's going to bother you, that things ain't going to happen. But just remember, that's what you're doing it for. You were never doing it for you to begin with, and that's the key. So when you help and you provide help for somebody, and let's say you dealing with like a neighbor who just they mean as hell, but they need help walking down the steps, and they yell at you all the time. They give you crap, but then that one day, they're an elderly person and they got their cane and they can't get down the steps because I don't know, their caretaker didn't make it. And it's like what God would want you to do is be like, go take care of them, not not for any other reason other than you're doing it in His service. And even if you help that person and they get mad at you, don't worry about it, because you are still blessed. He is still watching over you, which kind of goes to the next part. And as you see, these two are kind of broken up. This is Matthew 5:11 through 12, and then you got Matthew 6:25 to 34. You can see that it's kind of a big separation. And clearly I'm pulling from a lot. So I definitely simplified. So what he's teaching is basically he got you. So you don't have to worry about it. He's got you. Since you're doing it for him, he got you. And the next part, you know, God takes care of us by providing what we need. and he kind of gives the two examples, which is why I think I broke that down. Um, and I'm wondering if that's the, let's see, let me check my notes real quick. Oh, yeah, yeah. So when you ask, that's that whole you receive. Now it's not like he's a genie in the bottle. Um, as you learn more in the gospel, you kind of realize that what you should be asking for, again, should be in the service of God. So if you're like, God, let me hit the lottery, I could really use the money. That ain't in the service of the Lord. I don't know what you asking him for that for. Um, and if you're like, oh, let me hit the lottery so I can help the needy. Well, you know, he he knows. Now, I'm not going to be here to act like I know who he going to pick, what he going to pick for. He creates the opportunity, and it might not be what you want, but it will be what you need. So, you know, so enduring and God provide. Number three, it's a category of its own. The world will not end until the prophecies are fulfilled. Four, breaking rejection versus accepting and obeying commandments. Now this one's kind of goofy because he he's saying rejecting the least important commandments in the law and teaching others to do the same will make you the least important person in the kingdom of heaven. But those that obey the commandments will will be the greater importance type thing. So it's almost like there's kind of hierarchy a little bit in that. Um, so yeah, yeah. I don't know too much about that, but I think what was interesting is that it's like even those that don't really get it, they still can make it. They're that whole lease part, which I found that kind of the most important part, more than whatever kind of little hierarchy thing. Because as far as I can tell, if you can make it to paradise, who cares if you the least? At least you made it, you know. So um, and I also think the reason why that's kind of an important thing that he's teaching right there, and I know this might be a little out of context, but it does follow in the story that there are some who would have never known what the commandments were to begin with, and yet they still make it to heaven. Case in point, when he was being crucified, he had the thief on whichever side it was that said, you this man has done nothing wrong. He shouldn't be here. And Jesus like, you know, by the end of the day, you're gonna be with me in the paradise. Well, guess what? That man, he was never baptized. He probably never even knew what the commandments were. He clearly was stealing because he's a thief, and yet he made it. Now he might be one of them least people, but he made it, and that's what's important, really. Um, So how to resist and protect against sin. Now, it is kind of hard to understand what does he mean by sin to begin with, because there are different ideas of what sin is. Most Christians is like, seems to be like an act against God or something against God. Um, when I would read some of the stuff of the Judaism, sin was missing the mark. Like you chose to do something bad for, you know, selfishness or whatever, for a for a desire, knowing that it was kind of bad. Like you chose the thing that you kind of knew was bad instead of, so I don't know how you personally define sin, and I'm not going. I ain't gonna get that deep, but that's what I seen because I was curious. Um, so we got lesson 5. These lessons all cover, you know, the resist and protection, sin beginning with our attitude and thoughts, and I kind of like that. That comes from the famous thing, like if you lust it in thought, you lust in your heart, and that's a sin, and that's a famous kind of saying. But that's what he's really getting at. Isn't that just because a thought popped in your head, you automatically sin because the thought popped in your head? That's not what he's actually saying. If you kind of pay attention to not just that part, but the whole conversation, he's referring to the idea that before you do something, a thought will come into your head. You see that pretty lady over there, that handsome fella, and you're like, hey, that when that thought comes to your head and you carry the attitude like, hey, that's okay to just to try to hook up with them, and you like, and you're married, by the way. Let's say you're married. That'll make it even better. You married and you see somebody that you find attractive, and now just because you had the thought popped in your head don't mean you sin. It is that you have to keep yourself away from those things to try to prevent the thought from even happening. But then the attitude goes with it. So the thought pops up and you're like, hey, the attitude might be, you know, hey, if I don't get caught, no harm, no foul. That's kind of the attitude thing. He's like, you know, that's where sin starts. When you think like, oh, I can reason myself out of doing something I know I shouldn't do, you're already messing up. So again, it is when the thought comes, you got to recognize the thought came and recognize that you don't have to act on the thought. And that's key. And that's something you have to do personally. And everybody's going to have their strengths and weaknesses, but that is where it starts. It starts with you, what you surround yourself with, what your attitude is. Um, and that kind of builds off the next one. Remove yourself, which causes you to sin. Again, if you lust after women, you know, and you married and stuff, don't go to, you know, a strip club. Shouldn't be going there probably anyway, but don't go to a place that's going to be a lot of women that's going to be tempting you to sin. If it's almost like an addict, when you are getting in recovery for being an addict, they'll tell you you have to stay away from those things that cause you to want to use. So it's kind of like the same thing. If you know that you have a weakness to certain type of sins, you try to avoid those things the best way possible. You can't always avoid everything, but you do your best. That's always the key about what I get from what Jesus is saying is, you clearly, we're not going to be perfect, but he does want us to try our best. He wants us to try our best, and we know whether we trying our best or not. And even sometimes our best, we still fail, and that's okay, as long as we keep trying our best and keep trying to improve. So the next one, let's see. Um, so the turn the other cheek kind of goes. I put this in this together. A lot of people use this to say like, well, somebody hits you, you're not supposed to hit them back. Uh, that's not the right context in which he's using this. This is the context again. It's how you react to a situation. Because he also talks about like, um, if somebody a little later when he says like, if somebody tries to sue you for your shirt, well, give them your coat too. Like it is trying to avoid letting people control you by your emotions. Somebody can call you a name and it might even upset you, but how you respond to that is on you. And being able to I have your feelings under control so that people can't manipulate you based off of your feelings, which will happen. You'll heck, people manipulate themselves with their own feelings. Whenever you feel good, you tend to be a lot more generous. You ever have a good time, you feeling real good, and you more willing to pay for extra. You might give a bigger tip than you normally would. Like you tend to be a little bit more generous. Well, it goes the same way with other stuff. Like when you mad, you're gonna be less generous. So it is kind of keeping yourself from being controlled by your emotions, essentially. And only you can control your emotions. And I know it ain't easy, but at least you're trying. That don't be rude. Don't be ruled by material possessions. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Um, don't be ruled by worldly and selfish desires. Again, pretty self-explanatory. You can't. You ain't going. If you're held up on you scared to help out because you might lose something, he's kind of saying it was never yours to begin with. If you really following in service of God, everything you are given, you kind of have that mentality. You don't deserve anything, so be grateful for everything you have. So when you have nice things, be grateful you have those nice things, but realize those things as they were given to you can be taken away. And I mean that could be that could be your health. You could have good health all all your life, and then out of nowhere you get some, I don't know, you have a stroke, and then it just everything goes downhill from there. Or you got some kind of, what do they call that, like a, maybe you got like some heart condition that nobody ever knew about, and then whatever causes it to get triggered, and that can happen. So that's kind of like, don't be ruled by those things, um, and understand, don't sell yourself for those things, because that's what'll happen. um, Hopefully I explained that good enough. Honestly, I think they're kind of self-explanatory, but all right, this is a pretty good lesson. Resolve disputes, don't let them fester. And this is kind of an important one. If you and your friend, if you mad about something that somebody did to you, take care of it. Don't let that build up. Don't let that resentment build up. And if it's you and a friend and you guys did something wrong, or you and a loved one or whoever, you gotta fix that bridge. Don't let that just keep building and building. Take care of it. The faster you take care of it, the better. Don't swear on any on anything for a promise. Just say yes or no, um, which is nice. You can remember. No peaky promises. Apparently, you just say, yeah, I'm gonna do something, or no, I ain't. Um, and then this is like this. These categories fall under, how to treat others, love your enemy, pray for those who mistreat you, and that's a hard one. We should treat others how we want God to treat us. And I know later on he does kind of say like, and we should treat others how we want them to treat us. So there is, oh, I guess that's next. Treat others how you want them to treat you. Those kind of go hand in hand with that. Now, this is as simple as this might seem to y'all. I did kind of have some weird, thoughts with this. For example, if somebody broke into my house with a weapon, and it seems like they might just be robbing me, I don't know, but they broke in with a weapon, and I got a weapon and shot them, defending myself type situation, and it made me wonder, well, where would God stand on that? And I think it makes sense that I would say, you know what, if I broke into somebody's house and they shot me when I broke into their house, I can't really blame them. So I think when that was kind of important, because I think when it comes to defending yourself, if you're on if you can accept that if I had done that, I would expect this from me. I would expect others to treat me this way for doing that thing. I think that's okay. Now, to an extent, because you also got stuff where he don't want you calling out like, don't talk about how this person has a problem, like they ain't following right, when you want to get on somebody for gambling and everything else. I don't know, and they in the church, and they ain't doing things right, and you want to get on them and say how they such a bad person, blah blah blah, and try to beat them down, and it's like, but yet you might have your own stuff going on. He does kind of point that out, because not there ain't none of us perfect. So what he wants you to do is he wants us to lift each other up and support each other, but also understand, support those that are wanting to get better. So, and you'll see this a lot where he interacts with a lot of people, where some people, like the rich guy, he comes over and he's like, I want to be a disciple, I want to follow you, and he's like, well, sell all your stuff you can, and he's like, nah, forget it. Like, kind of falls under the same thing where heck, I don't even know where I was going with that train of thought. Anyway, let's keep moving on. um yeah, because, well, I guess that falls on the material stuff. He was unwilling to give up his material things. um don't throw pearls before swine. Oh, that's kind of goes along with what I was just saying. Like, you can't teach those who don't want to learn. You can't teach those who do not listen. You should not waste your time. And I, this for can be used for many things. there are times where, for example, we addiction. If somebody's not willing to get themselves clean, they ain't gonna get themselves clean. Now you can help them as a person, or and do and try to push them in the right direction, or guide them in the right direction. But you ain't helping them if you're gonna spend all your time, your money, when and they gonna take that and just keep using. Like if you give them money to go to rehab, and yet they use that to buy more drugs, or whatnot. Don't waste your time with those who are unwilling to listen. Focus on those who will listen. And maybe those people might listen later on down the road. Maybe they just ain't ready to listen. So it doesn't hurt to at least try. But don't waste all your effort on somebody who ain't gonna listen, ain't gonna, warning of false prophets. I like how he kind of broke that down. Let me see where this was at real quick. I should have been reading my cheat sheet more. Where's that at? Yeah. So I kind of like how he broke this down. They dress like sheep, but they're wolves. By watching what they do and how they behave, we can discern sheep from wolves. Wolves can dress and look like sheep, but wolves cannot escape their nature of being a wolf. Now, you can use this. I mean, a lot of this stuff I think you can use in is life lessons, good life advice, really. So, a person cannot be doing evil things yet claim to be doing good things, cannot live a life of excessiveness while telling others it is bad, yet good for you. And that's kind of, that right there is kind of a key thing. If you I'm gonna pick on some preachers right now. If somebody talking about they Christian, and they can be, that's fine. They Christian, but they gonna tell you you need to give up all these things, but they don't. You need to give up. You need to give up. Your lifestyle of having all these nice things, and being around all these people, and blah blah blah. But they doing it. Nope. Nope. It's it's kind of like, well, I think that's good explanation. I can give examples all day, but Jesus claims, let's see, calling Jesus Lord will get you in the kingdom of heaven. Only the ones who obey God on the day of judgment. Many will claim to know Jesus. They did great things in his names. They cast out demons, performed miracles, all that stuff. However, Jesus knows the truth of who the wolves are and who the sheep are. And again, you've got to do that. And in a way, you've got to do that using some reasoning, some, and it's okay to do this. Use some reasoning and logic and things like that, because you should question those things. And it's okay to question those who are telling you something and you're not exactly sure what they're saying. And it's okay to look into it more. I even advise people to do this with any religion. Christianity is no exception. Study the material, see what it's saying, see if it holds true, and it's got to hold true personally in your life, family's life, your community's life, you know, it should hold true for all those things. So, and you got to ask yourself, does the evidence you look into, does it match? Now, that's easy to say for one thing, but you got to also look at, do you believe certain concepts? Like I'll give you an example. This is what I kind of like about Jesus a lot is, he don't really separate men and women. Like men and women getting the same thing, getting the same treatment, everything. He, if you read some of the other gospels, he interacts with women and he has them teaching stuff and telling people stuff here and that, like that in John, I think it's a Samaritan lady. He has her go tell all people about him and bring them over, and they all believed her what she was saying, and then after hearing Jesus speak, he they believed because they heard for themselves. But oh, hey Ray, happy Friday. I know I just got off work. I I'm just going over a little Bible study. I'm not trying to preach or nothing, but just I was curious on what the book of Matthew said, so I was just I went through it. I did find some interesting stuff, which I'm going to get to. Stuff I didn't know. Um, since you're here, Ray, what do you think about this? Because this is interesting. I think whether you Christian, not Christian, just so in Matthew 4:24, it says, um, and his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with drivers' disease, torment, and those which were possessed by devils, those which were lunatic, and those that had palsy, and he healed them. So, what I found super interesting is this part right here. Now, this is the King James Version, lunatic. And if you look what that is, that's mental illness. And why I found this interesting is because there was a separation between those possessed with devils and mental illness. So even back then, at least to some extent, there was a difference, and they understood there was a difference. But what I found even more, I guess this is a little bit more concerning for myself. If I hit this translate all English translation, you'll see the first one uses lunatic, but not all of them. Not all the translations use it. So I was definitely confused when I was studying this. Like, wait a minute. So at least some of the versions say they understood there was a difference, but then other versions, there it is again, but not here. Yeah, I was like, so did they understand there was a difference, or didn't they? I don't. This is why I don't like. This is why I don't get into religions too much, because start getting into all that interpretation, like translation stuff, and it's like, well, did, did they know that there was such things as a separation between mentally ill and demon possessed? I'd really like to know. It seems like in a lot of some translations look like they did, but in some they didn't. I don't know. But yeah, I found that fascinating. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff, little things like this when I was reading through that I never picked up going to Sunday school and stuff. So yeah, I was shocked by this. I think that's one of the biggest things. I was like, whoa, I'd never even heard that. Um, Yeah. Yeah, I definitely I never heard that there was a separation. A lot of times I always heard like the mentally ill, are dealing with demons and whatnot. And then I know people who are mentally ill and stuff, and it's like, no, they ain't dealing with devils like that. Like they got some problems. And not demons. They got some mental problems because medication helps, you know? Somebody who's depressed, that's not a demon doing it to them. You telling me you could take some pills and it puts it can put the demons at bay, give you a magic barrier or something? I don't know. I don't think so. Now, if you got mental illness, you take them meds. That's what's gonna help you. Just like if I can't walk, I'm taking a wheelchair. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Um, again, so he did talk about marriage. He only said this was the only thing he said in marriage during his sermon, which was God makes husband and wife one flesh. Keep in mind, it's husband and wife, not husband and wives. Divorcing does not cause two people to separate in God's eyes. However, he talks about, which this is again kind of an interesting topic, is where he says divorce exists because we sin. And I kind of think about it this way when I was looking at that. Um, War exists. God doesn't want us fighting with each other. He doesn't he doesn't want one group of people killing another group of people because we all his creation. God don't want one creation killing the other creation. He don't want that. But it, but because of human nature, because those things, war war happens. That's why in the Old Testament you do see times where it seems God directs to do war because sometimes it is a necessary. So I know that's taking it beyond, but I did kind of find that interesting that in his eyes he doesn't separate, but because understanding our nature of what happens, he does kind of create an out. So this just because divorce exists doesn't mean he likes divorce, but he understands we need it. So that makes sense. Um, the three type of people who should not get married, he said specifically the eunuchs, which I had a hard time trying to find out what a eunuch was because I really didn't know. I had a concept, but I guess it's somebody with a dysfunction of reproduction parts was the simplest answer I got. Uh, so those born that way, those made become that way. I guess if your stuff gets all messed up or whatnot, and then those who sustain from it to focus on kingdom of heaven. The way that he words it, he does basically say marriage is for creating a family. Yet he's not against people who can't have families to get married, if that makes sense. So I mean, getting married does make sense. It's to have a family. That's the whole purpose of it. But yeah, let's see other lessons. The sins that are unforgivable, blasphemy, and speaking against the spirit. That's another one, man. You get a lot of different interpretations because I had trouble with that one. And the best thing I could come up with, where's my little notes, is it has to do with kind of rejecting God when you know you're rejecting God. So it's where's my little thing? Let's see. Here it is. It's kind of like if we see God performing a miracle, you somebody, maybe yourself or somebody you know, they, let's say they got cancer, they terminally ill, they on the deathbed, they ain't gonna make it, and all of a sudden, boom, they better. Which this is, they've got medical documents of things like that happening. It doesn't happen often, but it happens. Just people just overnight just get better, no explanation. And it's like when you see those happen, you see it, and or you feel the Holy Spirit, which whatever that is. I mean, I know what the Holy Spirit is, but the problem was it's kind of hard for people to say exactly what it is when you feel it. They'll kind of say what it does. Uh, I ain't gonna get into that too much. But so you get those things, and then you reject them. You say, "Oh, they did," you know, you've been praying to heal that person, they get healed, and you're like, "Nope, that wasn't God." No, but it's knowing. That's another key thing. It also, some would say that you have to claim that it was the devil that did it. So from all those things I read, there was definitely an element of knowing. I've also heard some people say it's when you know you're doing wrong, and even though that people have reached out to you or you even to yourself, and you just reject to be forgiven. In fact, that you enjoy doing wrong so much that you don't want to stop. You don't even want to stop. So I've heard some people kind of explain it that way, but yeah, I wish Jesus would have, or the authors would have went more in depth with that, because there was a lot of different kind of interpretations with that. There's there's a lot of lessons on having faith, and I'm going to get back to that one because that's kind of interesting because of what faith is. I guess there's different definitions, but we should be careful what we say with our words, because our words speak from our hearts. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, if somebody says, if you hear somebody gossiping about your, a coworker, he telling you about your other coworkers, you better bet he talking to those other coworkers about you. So, kind of falls under that same thing. That's showing kind of who they are. Um, he does say uh, we should follow man's law as long as it doesn't go against God. He used the example when he has to pay a tax to the Romans, and they're like, "Are you going to pay that tax?" And he's like, "Hey, I give Caesar to Caesar, and I give what's God to God." So it kind of makes that pretty clear that as long as man's law doesn't interfere with God's law, it's good. And that kind of makes sense because man's law is our community's law. At least it should be. I know it's not always the case. You got a king, they make their own laws, but yeah. But at the end of the day, the people can decide whether to overthrow their rulers or not. So let's see. This one's pretty cool. Dealing with confrontations among believers, between two or more believers and church. Jesus lays out the process of arbitration. Believers can reach a settlement through mutual agreement of the offended parties, or if they can't, the church exercises the power of excommunication based on the two or three witnesses. God will honor the decision. I thought that was kind of interesting. So the process is if they will listen, talk with them in private. They're supposed to keep it to each other. So if you and a fellow Christian, I guess you could also do this with kind of family a little bit, but if you and a fellow Christian have an issue, you should talk about that in private. Just keep it between each other. If if you're trying to talk to the person about what you think they did wrong and they're not listening, you should take a few people from your congregation, that are close, to go with you to kind of maybe mediate or at least listen and see. And then Scripture teaches every complaint must be proven by two or more witnesses. So if I guess that's why you got to take the other believers with you or whatnot. You got to show that they wronged you and whatnot. Now, if they refuse to listen, you report the matter to the church. Those who refuse to listen must be treated like a non-believer. I found that kind of interesting because it seems like, not all, you should be welcoming to people, but not all people are good for the congregation. Not all people are going to be good for the church. If you got, I guess, one of them bad apples, it's better to remove one of them bad apples, especially when they causing all kinds of problems. No, like, and definitely don't give them some high ranking position. Make them a deacon or something. All right. So, how many times we should forgive others? As many times as they need. That was pretty simple. As long as they're truly sincere and they repent, that's the key. You don't just forgive because somebody says, "Please forgive me." They gotta prove that they want forgiveness, that they are seeking to repent and trying to actually be forgiven for what they done. That means acknowledging what they did wrong and trying to make sure that don't happen again, and trying to make right. The other lesson is strife can come by following Jesus. You know, as non-believers, they're gonna cause you problems sometimes, and that's just gonna come with the territory. These are the people that'll listen to God's message. He uses a parable about the farmer sowing seeds. You got the people who hear the message but don't understand it. Then evil comes and snatches the message from their hearts. This is the seeds that fell on the road. So let's see, and then people who gladly hear the message, accept it, but don't keep it deep in their roots. They don't last long once hard times come. They give up on the message. I think that's a lot of people. But then again, hard times sometimes make people grab it more. So I guess when people ain't got nothing to lose, that's when they really grab the message. They're like, I might as well go with this. I ain't got nothing else. Let's see. People who hear the message but worry more about worldly desires, getting rich, social status, attention, approval of others. The message gets choked out and they don't produce anything good. And then you have the people who do hear and understand the message. They grow strong roots and produce 160, 30 times more than what was planted. Let's see. The most important commandments, and I like this because, he dummied it down for us. Instead of giving us 10, he just gave us 2. I like that. Makes it simple for me to remember because I always forget what all the 10 commandments are. I know a couple of them though. To love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. That's easy to follow. I like this one. The house of God is a place of worship, not profit. So this circles back around to the faith question. So in this chapter and verse, a man brought his son who was possessed to Jesus, claiming Jesus' disciples could not cast out the demon. The demons, I guess more than one. Jesus cast out the demons, and afterwards the disciples asked Jesus why they couldn't cast out the demons. A little context. When Jesus originally sent out his disciples, I know I skipped over this part, but it's not really a lesson. When he sent them out, he gave them the ability to do miracles, to cast out demons. He gave them that ability when he sent them out. And as you can see, not all of them were successful. And which is kind of interesting, because it's like even if you were granted the gift, the knowledge, the know-how, you know, without enough faith, apparently it ain't gonna work, or it might not work. So Jesus replied, their lack of faith was the reason that they could not cast out the demons. But I had to ask the question, what is faith which Jesus claims they lacked? This was kind of a big one I was hung up on, because what did he mean? What lack of faith? Because you could say faith is believing without seeing. And or as far as I could tell, they all believed there was a God. So they had faith that there was a God. But so that didn't make sense. Was it that they lacked faith that, Jesus gave them the ability? I, I'm not too sure about that. I wasn't sure what he meant about what kind of faith. Because faith is can be many things. So I had to go back through the whole freaking book, and I looked at all the spots where faith was mentioned. So what I found is every time I seen him kind of demonstrating faith or talking about faith, there was definitely two elements. So this is just my personal. So my personal definition of the faith he was saying that they were lacking was believing by the will of God all things are possible and acting accordingly. So it's two things. It's believing and acting. You have to believe it and act as if you believe it. But it can't be your will. It has to be God's will. So that's the key element. Believing that God's will can do all things, and you have to act as if you believe that. And I think that is what he means by what they were lacking in faith. So yeah, and that was really the main points. So what I found interesting, we'll go back to this sermon stuff. Most of this stuff that he teached in the sermon, I realized that most of the book, he's going through and he's just giving examples of what he was teaching. So that's what I have in a lot of my notes, is because I went through, I skipped over a lot clearly, but a lot of times his stuff he's teaching, um, what he just went over at the beginning. Where's that? His disciples. I'll show you what I'm looking at. This is my cheat sheet. It's a little bigger than the other ones. Oh yeah. This was another one I found pretty fascinating. Now I might just be interpreting them a little goofy because I could sometimes interpret stuff goofy, but I still kind of seen it this way, and I was like, man, that's interesting because I don't even I don't even know if that's correct or not, but it's still interesting. Anyway, when Jesus interacts, this is a famous thing that most people know about this one. When Jesus came to whatever that place is called, he found a possessed person in a tomb. The demons this is the guy that's possessed, he says we are legion. In the book of Matthew, he doesn't say we are legion, but in I don't know if it's Mark or Luke, one of them, he says it. Anyway, the demons recognized Jesus as Son of Man and asked if he has come to punish them before their time. The demons begged Jesus to cast them out into a herd of pigs. Jesus did as they asked, cast them into the herd of pigs, and then they went and they drowned themselves in a lake. What I found so fascinating about this part is he could have just cast them out. He could have said, no, you just going to go in the ether, you just going to go away. But they begged him to cast them into the herd of pigs. And then once he granted what they asked, they kind of did a mockery by forcing the pigs to drown themselves. So what I found so interesting though is demons, they're wicked and evil, right? They're the unclean spirits. They're the bad guy. Clearly, they are enemies of God. I don't think anybody would say demons are on God's side. So Jesus could have ignored their request, simply cast them out, but he granted their request. And why that's interesting is I think this is a good demonstration that Jesus, he wanted to demonstrate one of those big lessons, which was love thy enemy. Because who created the demons to begin with? Whether you think they are jinn, or you think they the fallen angels, or they're just some unclean spirit, however you want to believe they are not God's. They are clearly God's enemy, and yet he granted their request. He was showing that even he was showing a at least a form of love to his own enemy. So, as I said, God's love extends to even demons. I think that's uh, an interesting concept when I was looking at, but I think that's kind of what he's demonstrating here. Because who's a bigger enemy? So yeah, I was like, yeah. So I know I've never heard it used in that interpretation and whatnot. I'm pretty sure they never taught it that way, but I kind of seen it that way because I was like, why did they begged him to cast him in the herd of pigs? He didn't have to. Why did he? And I think that's what he was kind of showing. He wasn't. He at least got him out of the guy because they clearly didn't want to leave the man that they possessed, but he at least gave him the pigs. And then everybody got mad because they the pigs died. So um, this is other stuff. I didn't add this to the main teaching stuff, but um, he does. He talks about where he gets his authority. That God, his father gave him the authority to do all those things. Um, I put down when Matthew starts to follow. Jesus is in Matthew 9:9. The reason I thought that was kind of important is at least it lets you know that from that point on, Matthew was a witness to what he writes about. But anything before that, he had to have been writing based on what he heard from likely the other disciples. Because the four gospels, Matthew and John were the only two disciples that followed Jesus. Mark and Luke, now I don't remember. One of them had met Jesus, but the other one did not. He collected, I want to say it might have been Mark that did not meet Jesus, and he collected all the his stuff from eyewitnesses, how he kind of put his gospel together. So that's why I thought it was important to know when he finally got to Matthew. Um, yeah, and I even put down like what lessons did he cover when he did stuff. Oh, so there was a centurion. He goes to some place and there's a centurion, and the centurion picks Jesus out and he's like, I know that you can. Yeah, this one. He came up explaining that his servant was in terrible pain. Jesus replied he would go heal the servant. The centurion said his home was unworthy of Jesus' presence. Instead, he suggested Jesus just give the order and heal him. And why this is kind of interesting is this man was a Gentile. He was a non-Jew. So there's a good chance he's never even heard of, God of Abraham and all that stuff. Yet he was able to recognize Jesus' holiness and his divine authority. And I believe this was a good amount of evidence to of God's presence among Gentiles. I know they always say, the Hebrews and Jews, those were the chosen people, but clearly God still had his connections with the Gentiles. He didn't ignore everyone else. They might just not have understood God as well, maybe, because they didn't have all that the history and lineage that the Jews had. But clearly, this soldier, he knew all this stuff about Jesus. Yet, a lot of the Jewish priests, I was going to say Pharisees. Oh man, I forgot what they're called. The Pharisees. A lot of the Pharisees, who were the Jewish teachers, a lot of them didn't recognize Jesus, didn't recognize his divine authority. But yet this Roman soldier did. Now, how's that? Which is a good question. Why was there some who could recognize Jesus, but others could not? And it wasn't just based off of whether they were the chosen one or not. So there was clearly those who were connected with God, God the Father, they could see it. I'm pretty sure that's what that's kind of showing, that because there is a distinction between those who did not believe who he was and those who knew who he was just by looking at him. So yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, but I didn't add that into my little lesson thing. That was just my side notes. Let me see. Was there anything else? Sent out his disciples. Yep. He gave them the ability to do all these great things. He did tell them Now, he did tell them to just only go to the people of Israel. When he first told them to go out, he told them to stay away from the Gentiles and Samaritans. He said only stick to the people of Israel. Um, they were not supposed to receive payment. They were to announce themselves, take no money for a traveling bag or extra clothing. They were to seek out those willing to give him shelter, food. They were to bless the homes that they stayed in, and if they did not accept them, um, shake off their what was it? Shake the dust off and just keep moving on. Like, don't waste your time. And again, that falls under all them lessons. Let's see, stripes. Oh, another thing I found kind of interesting, because if you know a thing about the story of Jesus, when Jesus died at the cross, Joseph, uh, Mary's husband, he's not mentioned. And Jesus, this isn't in, I don't think it's in Matthew. I forget which one. I don't know which one it's in, but Jesus tells John, the disciple, to take care of his mother. Um, after he's resurrected and all that stuff, he's like, take care of my mother, because Jesus would have been the oldest. It would have been on him to take care of the mother if the father died. So that suggests Joseph had died by the time Jesus was crucified. Joseph, his, we'll call, earthly father, was likely dead at that time. So he kind of had John take care of his mom, and it never says. None of them ever say when Joseph passes. When and which I found kind of odd that it never, apparently wasn't a big enough event for it to be mentioned when he passed. But it does say when he went into his town. Oh crap! Now I don't know where that's at. Well, he went back to his town, and they say something to the extent of, "Aren't you the carpenter's son? The son of Mary, and his sisters and all that other stuff." Because apparently his siblings did not follow his teaching. Um, well, not all of them. I think there was one James that might have, if I remember correctly. I think James was kind of, I guess that's his stepbrother. Um, he was one of the 12 disciples, if I remember correctly, or at least that's kind of implied in one of the books. I don't know if it's Acts or something. Like I said, I'm not one of those who know their stuff like that well. I just remember a lot of the stuff they taught me in Sunday school. But yeah, but clearly Joseph was alive at that time, because they said son of the carpenter. So I would say it was in his last few years of his ministry that his father died. Well, with Joseph, uh, that was another thing. I forgot to write that down though. Yeah, these are all the parables. The analogy of what the King of Heaven is. But yeah, you know what the Book of Matthew does. I like that because he kind of, a lot of that stuff is good life lessons. There was some stuff in there I had not thought of before, or I completely missed, or I've at least never been told. Um, the Pharisees and I'm going to say it wrong, but Sadducees, Sadducees, whatever they call. So the difference is Pharisees were middle class and they believed in the law of Moses and the written law and the oral law. So apparently there was two different forms. The Sadducees or whatever their names are, they were the high temple. They were the elites, and they only believed in the written word. Well, let me see if what I found interesting about these fellas is, let's see if it pulls it up. They were all about the temple. They were the elites who believed only in the authority written in the Torah, rejecting oral tradition. They did not believe in the afterlife, the resurrection of the dead, or angels. And I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that until I had to kind of understand who they were. I never realized that the Sadducees or whatever, that they didn't even believe that there was an afterlife or anything. They didn't even believe in angels, which is kind of crazy because you got to think, aren't there parts in the Old Testament they talk about angels, but apparently they just thought they were always God, I guess. I don't know. It didn't make a lot of sense to me on that front, but they as it says, they basically went away after the temple fell in 70 CE. Soon after Jesus died and was resurrected, the second temple fell, and these people, they just disappeared. So what I found interesting is the Judea, is it Judea that's being taught today? You know, the religion of the Jews, Judaism. Judaism is based off of those Pharisees and not the Sadducees or whatever they're called, because they kind of disappeared. Because if you ask those in Judaism, they'll say that angels exist and stuff like that, and there is an afterlife. So yeah, I didn't even realize that. Right there, we see that there was kind of a branch off to begin with, which kind of brings context into what Jesus was dealing with at that time. So you already see there was a split. And then when he dealing with the Pharisees, or the Pharisees, or the Pharisee, I hope I'm getting that right. He dealing with them. He was telling them they didn't have the the understanding of what they were trying to teach. And that's because they were trying to be gatekeepers. I mean, that's what it come down to. That's why they acted the way they did. Which again, that's kind of why Jesus kind of preached against it. He don't like it when people think they the only ones who know the truth and all that stuff. Like, I really do think after reading it, he wants you to have that relationship with his father, and that was his big thing. It was like, don't just let somebody tell you and you just believe it. You know, go learn it for yourself. Go test it. Go see what you believe, and listen to those. See how they act. Do they live in the which way they preach? You know, look at all those things. So, yep. Well, now I didn't do this for the other books. Um, I know I started reading John after I did Matthew, and I realized that Matthew was a lot more kind of organized. John's seems like he's all over the place. when I was trying to read his stuff. So, but yeah, I think I don't know. It was worth doing. I did get a better understanding of a lot of things. I thought this was kind of funny. The Cantonese woman, um, she goes over and begs Jesus to help her daughter. She's full of demons. Jesus didn't even say anything. He just kept going, and she had to loudly beg, and his disciples were even like, you gonna get rid of her or what? She annoying. He was like, he was sent here only to help the Israel people because they were the flock of lost sheep. But now he wasn't saying that to he was saying that to her. He's not saying it like that's all he was there for, clearly. And she knelt before Jesus begging to help, and Jesus replied, "It isn't right to take away food from children and feed it to dogs." I'm like, daggone, Jesus don't compare this woman to a dog. Jeez. He ruthless. Like I heard about him flipping over tables and getting that whipcord on people, but daggone, this woman asking for scraps. He said, "We ain't taking no food away from children to feed the dog." Uh, yeah, that insult was. I don't know. I was laughing when I read that part. I was like, "Whoa!" The woman claimed that even puppies get crumbles gets crumbs that fall from the owner's table. And Jesus praised her for her faith and healed her daughter. It was what I found interesting. His reaction, his dealing with the woman was very different versus the healing of the Roman soldier. Because the Roman soldier was like, "I know you can heal. I know that she's begging." He called her a dog. Whoa! But I I I think it goes back to that whole faith thing. It was that a Roman soldier to go up to a Jew. Now I know one of the other books says the Roman soldier sent a servant. So I know there's some people will be like, well, there's whether he sent the servant or he personally did it. The point of this is for a Roman to interact with a Jew in the fact that they think that they're divine like that. That's a lot of faith because he can get flack for that. The Romans, they had their own gods at the time. They you know and you following you know some Jewish god is the way they looked at it, like, and he's still seeing it. So I think that's why his reaction's a little different because he was in a place of authority and recognized authority. So he gave kudos to that. He even said he was impressed. So I think he was pushing this girl to see that she would push it, showing the what's that word? She was persistent. So I think he would have took care of her daughter regardless. But sometimes they hold that carrot in front of us just so we can move a little faster, move in the right direction, and eventually they can give us the carrot. That's kind of what that was. So yeah, okay, well, yeah. So Jesus got mad. That's another thing I find interesting is as much as people always act like Jesus was always passive and was such a nice guy, which I mean I think he was a nice guy. He called it how it was. I mean, he called some of them people a den of vipers. Like he called them all kinds. We're talking about the Pharisees or whatever. He called them all kinds of names, which I don't know. I kind of found it funny because people are like, you're name calling you can't call yourself a Christian, you name calling, and it's like Jesus did. He called it as it was. Now I don't think you should do it to be for malice, but call a spade a spade. Ain't nothing wrong with it. And he did it. He didn't care. Yeah, yeah. And keep in mind these notes right here. These are my shorthand notes before I shortened it down again. So the notes I did originally take, and some of them were by hand, was a lot. Felt like I almost rewrote the book taking notes because I went verse by verse, line by line because I really wanted to understand it a little bit better. I had a few questions, like I said, and I was pointed to this, so I read it. I'm not a preacher, teacher. I'm just giving a class presentation on what I learned on my project. Take it that way. If you want to learn more, go to church and find a preacher man, or better yet, go read yourself. But I'm gonna tell you, you read it yourself. You better have a computer handy and know somebody to call to help interpret stuff. Because some of the stuff is you're not sure about. So yeah, I think I'm gonna call it here. Is there anything in? Yeah, I always think about that house of God and its place of worship, not for profit, but not to get political or get messy like that. But you, some of these churches on what they preach, it makes me wonder. Makes me wonder what Jesus would do if he came in nowadays. I think he'd be doing a little bit more than flipping over tables. I'll tell you that much. I think he'd be burning the places down. To be honest, woo, some of them. And we talking about some of them mega churches too. I'd be like, well, just burn it down, start back over. Not all of them, but we all see it. We all see those ones that we're like, what in the world? This ain't a church. This is a business. They ain't teaching. They're just gonna let you just do whatever you want. Yeah, I like the two commandments. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here because I am tired and I need to go to sleep. Um, I've been awake for longer than I need to be. For all you who watched, hope you learned something. Um, and I'll see you next time. I'm gonna try to stream tonight. If I can get some people together, hoping to play that RV there yet. I don't know. You play as a midget in an RV. I don't know. Anyway, this is Old Damn out.